Hello, everybody, and welcome to Mixed Rhythm on YouTube. This would be. I am super, super excited to introduce you all to today's special guest for the show. I was fortunate and very lucky to sit down with Field Guide, and we talk about music, his music. We talk about Coldplay. We talk about all different other kinds of artists that he's interested in and listened to growing up, and the Eagles, and we talk about playing on the East Coast, and we talk about the new record and the last two records, and it's a lot of great conversation. So I don't want to keep you all too long, keep you waiting, and so without further ado, here it is, my interview with Field Guide. And we are back and joined by the one and only Field Guide. How you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm well. So I want to ask you about growing up. Kind of what music were you into growing up? You grew up in Winnipeg?
I grew up close to Winnipeg in Brandon. It's a couple hours away. Yeah, my dad listened to like a lot of kind of 90s country stuff and some classic rock stuff, the Eagles and like folky stuff like James Taylor and whatnot. And my parents are religious too, so some kind of Christian music and stuff growing up. So kind of a bit of a mix. And then sort of grade six, grade seven, I started sort of finding my own things on top of that, but still like that country music and still an Eagles fan.
And I mean, speaking of music, I want to ask about when you first started playing music. What was your first instrument?
I started playing guitar. My parents put me in like classical guitar lessons when I was like 5 years old, which is kind of funny. It's sort of a lot of money spent on just like learning how to hold your expensive little classical guitar and whatnot. So I did that for a few years and then sort of I wasn't super into it as a kid. Like, so sort of took a step back and then came back. And my dad plays guitar and has played in, some like cover bands and stuff like that. So kind of came back with him teaching me how to play like BTO songs and like Sweet Home Alabama and stuff. And at that point I was like, oh, this I like.
So when you first kind of started listening to your own music, what kind of stuff did you find like by yourself?
Well, actually, one of the first bands I found was Coldplay. Um, and yeah, later went on to record that cover record just because it was such a huge early influence on me and on songwriting. It was sort of like the first, it feels like the most memorable um finding on my own just because it wasn't something my parents would listen to. Like there was, some country stuff that I found earlier, but Coldplay was sort of like, oh wow, what's this? This doesn't sound like what's on in my household kind of thing.
Do you think Coldplay gets too much hate?
I think they do. To be opinionated for a minute, I really don't like their new records at all, and so I feel like they maybe get the appropriate amount of maybe not hate, but the appropriate amount of criticism for that. But I guess it's inevitable, when a band gets that big, it's just like they're gonna get made fun of, and I mean, fair enough. I'm sure they can take it.
Sure. And so talking about like their early records, I mean, you love Parachutes. What kind of other what are your other Coldplay picks if you could pick from their records?
Totally. I mean, Rush a Bullet to the Head, X and Y, and Viva La Vida. Basically, those four I still put on. I really really like. And then I think after that there's maybe like a few songs here and there, and then like by at this point it's like I'm completely unaware
Yeah.
of what's going on in that world.
Whatever Chris Martin's doing, it doesn't seem to be working for the OG fans, but I mean, what can you do, you know?
I think I think on the other hand it is sort of like in a way funny to desire and hope that a band just does the same thing forever. It's like whatever, let
Yeah.
them do whatever they want.
I mean, there are bands that do that. Like, you look at AC/DC or something, where they've made the
Totally.
same record like 10 times, but I mean, some of the best bands ever change their sound. And speaking of like other bands, so you find Coldplay. What other stuff do you kind of start gravitating towards after that?
Um, I mean, I feel like I sort of have these like two worlds of influences because growing up and really honestly up until like maybe 5 years ago, I probably would have like sort of described myself as like a guitar player first before a songwriter. And so, um, I like every kind of young guitar player, I like was learning lots of John Mayer solos and stuff like that, and a lot of country stuff too. Like, certainly not as deep as some of the like wicked country players that are in this city. But I was looking up to those folks and like learning a lot of like Brent Mason solos and things like that. Um, but yeah, and then that sort of almost felt like a completely different world from the songwriter thing, which was like I guess in high school, Coldplay, Kings of Leon was a really another big one that way. And then sort of eventually kind of found a lot of like, I guess more like indie stuff per se, like Canadian indie stuff, like, you know, Andy Schaaf, Bahamas, Lee Fullback, a couple of those I got that open for this year, which was rad because I'm actually a huge fan. And then, yeah, Big Thief, Dawes, Courtney Barnett, a lot of that kind of stuff. And that sort of is what like I was like, oh, okay, like this is stuff that's really getting me in a songwriting realm.
Sure. And so you like you mentioned you opened for Bahamas and more like that's where we met. And so I want to
Ooh.
ask about your first trip to Nova Scotia. How was that?
I truly loved it. Honestly, I had an amazing few days. I've been out to like Fredericton and PEI and super briefly in Halifax to go play a festival like nearby. And I'd always sort of like enjoyed it and kind of known like, oh man, I want to get out here more. And I mean like, had like some incredible weather and got to play some of like my favorite shows of my career. So that didn't hurt. But yeah, I really want to come back. I'm kind of already like cooking up some plans to get out there in the fall and maybe follow up with like a little club show or something.
That would be fantastic. I mean,
Totally.
we in Nova Scotia would strongly welcome you with open arms. And so I want to ask you about your music. So your we'll start kind of before your first record, and then we'll get into that. Um, your number one stream song is "You Were." Kind of tell me about the process of making that, putting that out, and then it really taking off.
Sure. Yeah, I wrote that song and I made this like little EP called Full Time, which is the first thing I put out. It's like 4 songs, and I went down to this place called Nevada City, California to mix it with a guy named Oz Fritz. Um, he's done like a bunch of Tom Waits stuff and he's done a bunch of Lee Volbeck stuff, which I'm a big fan of. So I chased that down there, and that was really cool. And while we were kind of like mixing together, I was like sort of in the sessions, but when I wasn't, I was doing some writing. So I wrote that song actually there, like right kind of as that first thing I did was being finished. Um, and kind of like took it home. I was really early. Like I was just sort of, one of the first few times I played any of my songs with a band, we were just kind of sort of jamming that song, and the sort of the general arrangement came together. Um, and yeah, and then I ended up doing a good chunk of it out in Vancouver at this studio called Monarch. And um yeah, it did go through a few like sort of iterations. I had tried it on a session at home, but it wasn't quite right, and then had gone out to Vancouver and worked on it, and then still it was sort of like I was like, I don't think the vocals quite right, so I ended up going back again um to chase that down. And yeah, I'm glad I did. Um yeah, it's kind of a wacky, random, little algorithmic thing.
I want to ask you about your debut record, "Make Peace with That." It was released last year, and if I can tell you my experience with the record, I saw you and heard your music for the first time when you opened for Bahamas. I had heard your name around through one of my friends and former guest of the show, Kylie V, had played a show with you
Cool.
out in Vancouver, and so had strongly recommended. And so I bought the record at the show and couldn't wait to get home. Threw it on, and the whole way home, had a 3 hour drive that night, and it was on loop, and I really really loved the record. And so I want to ask you about your process of making that record. So was it kind of a collection of stuff you'd written for a while, or did you all kind of write it with this focus in mind?
Totally. Yeah. Thanks for saying that. Yeah, it was sort of just some songs. I moved to Toronto in the fall of 2019 and been just sort of like going to shows and meeting people. And I had sort of the full intention of like really moving there and kind of like um sort of building a thing there, and I had started to. So I was just sort of like meeting people and kind of putting a new band together out there and writing songs. And then the pandemic hit, and um, I stuck it out actually for another year um, before moving back to Winnipeg for the time being. And when I did that, we brought all these songs back, and we made them just with kind of like my friends in Winnipeg. And my friend, his name's Roman, has this weird little shed right by the river, with like a DIY studio in it. So we did it like mostly live off the floor. Um, yeah, which was different and really new, but really fun, and kind of a totally different a really nice way of doing it, especially in the pandemic. Like that. Actually, this new record has been. I've kind of gone back to the sort of more. It's in quite a few different locations, and there's live elements, but it's more in pieces. But it was really special to do the record that way, just because it was sort of in just a window when all five of us could be in this little space and make that music together, and we just had not been doing that otherwise. So um in a way it kind of, yeah, like it's sort of, I think, the opposite of what a lot of people did, which was do this sort of piecing together. But the chance that we had the opportunity to do that in a time when we weren't getting to play together was really awesome.
And then after that came Parachutes. Now, what inspired you to cover that record specifically? And you have great collaborators on there like Begonia, Dizzy, and Lizzie McAlpine, who just put out a fantastic record. What was what was the thought process behind covering Parachutes, and also who to get to collaborate with you on the record?
Well, I mean, that it was supposed to just be a show. I had a venue booked in Toronto and some players, and it was just, let's play the record down kind of thing. And then again, when that wasn't possible, it was sort of like, okay, well, can't do the show, but now we have a million times more time on our hands. So it was just, yeah, it was a little kind of winter project back in Winnipeg, which was cool. And um, honestly, I don't know. I'm generally overthinking most things, so it's sort of funny to reflect, and I don't think I really actually had any um, big like. I just sort of was like, oh man, it'd be cool to get Katie from Dizzy on this track, and Lizzie and Alexa from Begonia. It just kind of I think I guess part of it is that I don't I put almost no harmonies or anything on my own music, so it seemed like kind of a cool texture and thing to play with on something that was just different. So yeah, it was cool. All those folks agreed to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we talked about the show you played in Halifax, the three shows you played in Halifax, and at the show you played a lot of stuff from your upcoming record, right?
True. Yeah.
So I want to ask you about that record. What's it shaping up like right now?
I'm really, really, really excited about it. I think it's the best thing I've done so far. And yeah, it's all done, and I'm just kind of like getting things together to be ready to go, to put it out. But it's coming out in the fall. As long as I continue to get my shit together with it.
Perfect.
But I'm really excited. I did it recorded it up at my folks have a little cabin just outside of a national park, and did right in the sort of middle of winter, did like the guitar and vocals like generally live, and then went out to Montreal and built up the rhythm section part of it, and then went out to Vancouver, and there's a studio that I love out there that has like a bunch of synths and stuff, and so kind of use these different places, but it all kind of came together really nicely.
We're very much looking forward to hearing that, and we'll be sure to spin it on CFXU. And so before we wrap up, I'd like to ask, what do you have coming up? What's going on in the world of Field Guide? Where can people find you? Just go all out with all the plugs.
Awesome. I mean, I'm online at posting photos of myself and things that I'm doing. And I'm going out with a band called Wild Rivers in at the top of June. We're doing some I was gonna say Eastern Canada, but not really, Ontario and Quebec, and a few US dates opening for them, which is cool. And I have a couple of things in the summer, but mostly just kind of getting things ready for the record. But then songs are gonna kind of start rolling out in August, and then starting to cook up some sort of live playing for the fall too, and hoping to get out your way again.
Perfect. Thank you so much. This was a wonderful chat.
Thanks for having me.
Hello, everybody, and thank you very much for listening to this week's show. If you like what you heard, you can check out our Spotify page and, to a lesser extent, our Apple Music. You can find all of our episodes there. You can check us out on Instagram, instagram.com/mixedrhythm, facebook.com/themixedrhythm, youtube.com, just search up Mixed Rhythm, you'll find us there. And you can check out our website, mixedrhythm.wordpress.com, for all things Mixed Rhythm. We do photos, videos, radio, artist interviews, music, anything you can think of, we try to have our hands in it. Thank you very much for listening. We'll see you again next week.